Imagine a universe teeming with ancient empires, civilizations spanning thousands of star systems, each species honing their craft of war for millennia. Battles waged across cosmic battlefields with weapons beyond comprehension. The strong survived, the weak were forgotten. Yet among the stars, one species was ignored, dismissed as insignificant, primitive, harmless humanity. To the great galactic powers, Earth was nothing more than a speck, a backwater world inhabited by frail creatures incapable of true war. The Galactic Concord, a coalition of dominant species, maintained order across the cosmos. To them, war was an art, a science refined over ages, guided by codes of engagement, strategy, and honor. They viewed humans with mild curiosity at best, watching as we struggled with our first stumbling steps into interstellar space. Our technology was crude, our biology was weak, our weapons laughable. But most of all, they saw our emotions, our rage, our desperation, our unpredictability as a flaw. They believed war was for those who could calculate, who could anticipate, who could act with precision. Humans, we were volatile, reactive, too consumed by our own instincts. And that was their first mistake. The turning point came when humanity made first contact with the Voryx Dominion, an empire spanning 100 systems, their fleets forged from the cores of dying stars. To the Concord, the Voryx were a necessary evil, a war-hungry race that had been allowed to exist under strict treaties. To humanity, they were something far worse. Predators. The Voryx saw Earth as nothing more than a resource to be consumed. They did not negotiate. They did not warn. They simply sent a single fleet, 3 dreadnoughts, 12 cruisers, and a swarm of attack craft to reduce Earth to dust. A mere formality. Another minor extermination to add to their records. They expected surrender. What they got was something else entirely. The first signs of the attack came in whispers. Deep space stations along the Kuiper belt flickered offline. Lunar outposts sent garbled transmissions before falling silent. When the Voryx ships finally breached the Sol system's outer defenses, they found Earth eerily still. No desperate cries for help, no planetary shields being raised, only silence. The Voryx admiral, a creature of ruthless efficiency, gave the order. Orbital bombardment would begin at dawn over Earth's major population centers. Cities like New Tokyo, Neo-London, and the Sprawl would be the first to burn. Their fleet entered formation, weapons locked, targeting systems aligned, and then the first ship vanished. No explosion, no distress call. One moment it was there, the next, gone. Confusion spread through the Voryx ranks. Their scanners detected nothing. They assumed an anomaly, a glitch. Then another ship vanished, and another. Panic rippled through the fleet. In the cold vacuum of space, something stirred. Not a fleet, not a grand armada. Something worse. They came. From the darkness. Black ships, angular and predatory, slipping through the void like ghosts. They didn't attack from the front. They didn't broadcast demands. They struck like assassins. Humanity had learned from its wars, adapted, evolved. While the rest of the galaxy built massive dreadnoughts and towering capital ships, we built something else. We built hunters. These ships, sleek, agile, undetectable by conventional sensors, tore through the Voryx fleet with ruthless efficiency. They struck where it hurt the most, bypassing shields, ripping apart engines, severing power cores. In the span of an hour, half of the Voryx fleet was disabled. And the real nightmare had yet to begin. Then the boarding parties came, not in bulky drop pods, not with blaring sirens, but in silence. Teams of human soldiers, clad in adaptive armor, augmented beyond natural limits, breached the Voryx ships like living shadows. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They moved through the corridors with a precision that sent terror through the Voryx ranks. These weren't just soldiers. They weren't even killers. They were something. Elsa survivors of the battle, those rare few who managed to escape, spoke in hushed tones of what they had seen. Human operatives who could see in absolute darkness, who could feel the heartbeats of their prey. Warriors who could adapt to any combat environment in seconds. Creatures who killed without hesitation, without emotion. The Voryx had expected a simple extermination. Instead, they had encountered something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that did not fight for honor or conquest. Humans fought for survival. Within hours, the entire Vorix fleet was gone. No wreckage, no distress signals, just empty space where a once mighty armada had stood. When word spread, the Galactic Concord did not celebrate. They did not rally behind humanity as new allies. They watched, and in that moment they realized humanity wasn't just another species, they were predators. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to XenoChronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. The disappearance of the Vorix. Fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, an empire known for its brutal efficiency, its unshakable dominance, had been humbled. But more than that, it had been hunted. The Concord's High Council convened in secret away from prying eyes, behind layers of encryption so deep that not even the most advanced intelligence networks could penetrate them. For what they discussed was not just an anomaly, it was a warning. The humans were not what they had believed them to be. They were not another primitive race stumbling into the vast expanse of the cosmos. They were something else entirely, something terrifyingly adaptable, ruthlessly efficient and utterly unpredictable, and perhaps most unsettling of all. They had hidden it. For decades, humanity had remained passive, outwardly fragile, seemingly unremarkable. They had accepted their place among the stars, allowed themselves to be underestimated. But now, the truth was undeniable. This had not been an accident. It had been deliberate, and the realization sent fear rippling through the ruling factions of the galaxy. The surviving Vorix leaders demanded vengeance. They would not suffer humiliation at the hands of a lesser species, and so the Dominion gathered its full might, an armada of 10,000 warships, each bristling with world-ending firepower, the largest fleet ever assembled in its history. If humanity wanted war, they would drown in it. But even as their armada prepared, something felt wrong. There were no human transmissions, no declarations of victory, no threats, no ultimatums, just silence. The Vorix, like all other great civilizations, had fought wars before. But there was a pattern to war, a predictability. A species would fight, would claim territory, would make demands. But humanity? They didn't act like conquerors. They acted like ghosts. And so, as the Vorix fleet surged toward Earth, paranoia festered. Intelligence reports were inconsistent. Reconnaissance ships sent to scout human space simply vanished. The Vorix could not comprehend it, how a species so young could erase fleets without a trace. Then the first internal transmissions leaked, intercepted Vorix distress signals from their own ships, fragmented, distorted, but unmistakable in their terror, their inside. Not ships, not weapons, them. We never saw, and then silence. The fear spread like a disease. It wasn't just the Vorix. Other galactic factions began reporting similar events. Unknown. Vessels appearing and disappearing at will. Strategic facilities being compromised by unseen forces. Trade routes collapsing as entire convoys were lost without a trace. Humanity was no longer fighting a war in the traditional sense. They were dismantling it, one system at a time. The Concord, desperate to understand what was happening, sent an emissary, one of their highest-ranking ambassadors, escorted by a fleet of neutral ships under the protection of intergalactic law. They believed that if they could make contact, if they could reason with humanity, they could prevent total catastrophe, and so the emissary's ship entered human space. A tense silence followed. For days they received no response. Then finally a reply, a single chilling transmission. "You never should have come." The message was clear. This was not a negotiation. There would be no diplomacy, no compromises. Humanity was not seeking allies. They were doing what no species had ever done before. They were changing the rules of war itself. As the emissary's ship turned back, something appeared in the void ahead. At first it was mistaken for debris, a structure drifting silently through space. But as they drew closer, they realized the truth. It was a Vorix dreadnought, or rather, what was left of it. The vessel was gutted, stripped bare, its massive hull carved open like a corpse, but it was not empty. Across its surface, deep crimson symbols had been carved into the metal, words in a language that had never been seen before. Human words, a warning etched in the bones of a fallen empire. War is no longer a game. We are not your prey. The Concord Council watched in stunned horror as the images reached them. The meaning was clear. Humanity had evolved past the wars of the old empires. They were no longer fighting for land, for power, or for conquest. They were fighting to erase their enemies before they even had a chance to strike. And for the first time in history, the galaxy understood what true fear was. The galaxy had seen countless wars, but none like this. For centuries, interstellar conflict had been fought with precision, guided by an unspoken code, rules of engagement, treaties, honor. Even the most brutal wars followed predictable patterns: battles for territory, resource disputes, political maneuvers. But now those rules no longer applied. Humanity had rewritten them. The Vorix Dominion's great armada, 10,000 warships, a force that should have been unstoppable, never even reached Earth. They vanished, system by system, as though consumed by the darkness itself. No wreckage, no distress signals, no survivors. The only evidence of their fate came in fragments: a lone Vorix scout ship, found drifting near the event horizon of a dying star. Its crew had long since perished, their bodies untouched, their weapons still charged. No sign of battle. Only a single transmission left behind, looping endlessly in a cracked, static-laced voice. They were never meant to win. They were never meant to fight. By the time the Concorde realized the full scope of what was happening, it was already too late. Humanity had stopped waging war in the conventional sense. Instead, they had become something far worse, a force of nature. They did not conquer planets. They did not occupy territories. They simply erased, and the galaxy was running out of time. The experiment no one saw coming. In their desperation, the Concorde turned to their oldest records, searching for any clue, any precedent of a species evolving this way. There was none. No empire, no civilization had ever transitioned from prey to predator so quickly. But then, one discovery changed everything. Buried within the archives of an extinct race, one wiped out long before the Concorde's founding, was a single encrypted file, a relic of a forgotten age. It contained data from an experiment that should have never existed. A study of humans, not modern humans. Not the spacefaring civilization that now hunted among the stars. This data was old, ancient, collected when humans had barely discovered fire, when they still huddled in caves, fearing the night. And yet, even then, there had been something wrong with them. The report detailed observations from a nameless species that had once watched Earth in secret. They had monitored early humanity, waiting for them to die off like so many other primitive life forms. But instead they saw something else, a pattern. Humanity was weaker than other predators, slower, more fragile. By all logic, they should have been prey, and yet they survived, not by strength, not by speed, but by something far worse, by learning. Where other creatures fought, humans adapted. They stole the tactics of their enemies, refined them, perfected them, and then they exterminated them. The report's final entry was brief, a warning, carved into the last remnants of a doomed race. If they ever leave their world, stop them, no matter the cost. That warning had been ignored, and now the cost was being paid. The final stand, the Concorde's rulers, made their choice. If humanity could not be stopped through war, then there was only one solution left: extermination. Not a battle, not an invasion. A complete, systematic purge of every human colony, every outpost, every world that bore their mark. A preemptive strike against an enemy that had already won. They gathered their forces, what remained of the Vorix, the remnants of fallen empires, fleets that had once warred with each other, now bound by a single shared terror. A coalition of billions against a single species. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history emerged from hyperspace, encircling the Sol system. A ring of warships so vast that it blotted out the stars. And for the first time, they saw Earth not as an insignificant backwater world, but as a nightmare waiting to unfold. Humanity had one last chance to surrender. They did not, because they knew something the rest of the galaxy did not. The war had never been fought in space. The deception revealed, the Concorde's fleet prepared to fire, unleashing enough energy to turn Earth into molten slag. But then, something impossible happened. Their ships began to fail, not from enemy fire, not from sabotage, but from inside. Power grids collapsed, weapons refused to charge, engines locked down. Crews turned against each other, whispering of movements in the shadows, of something watching them from within their own ships. It was then that the final truth became clear. Humanity had never been fighting a war. They had been preparing a trap. The missing Vorix fleet, the erased armadas, the vanishing supply lines, it had all been part of something far bigger. A deception so vast, so unfathomable, that not even the greatest minds in the galaxy had seen it coming. The war had already ended, before it had even begun and humanity had won. The galaxy stood on the precipice of oblivion. The greatest armada ever assembled, a force capable of shattering planets, was now powerless, ensnared in humanity's unseen web. The war they had come to fight had never existed in the way they had imagined. They had believed themselves the hunters, but in truth they had always been the prey. The final revelation, the first death, was not from an explosion, nor from weapons fire. It was a whisper, a low, creeping sound over communication channels, a voice speaking in a language no one understood. It did not come from any human ships, nor from any known system. It was inside their networks, crawling through their systems like a living thing. Then, the lights flickered. One by one, starships went dark, their reactors failing, their weapons, systems refusing to respond. Crews scrambled to regain control, but it was useless. Entire battleships shut down mid-flight, left drifting like lifeless husks, and then the whispers turned to screams. Surveillance footage from inside the Concordes. Warships showed the impossible. Human soldiers were already aboard, not boarding from the outside, not breaching hulls. They were inside the ships from the beginning. They had been waiting. The truth hit like a collapsing star. Humanity's war had never been about ships or weapons. Their true weapon had been themselves. The galaxy had fought. Wars based on technology, on strength, on overwhelming force. Humanity had fought on biology. Every captured Vorix dreadnought, every missing fleet, every ship that had vanished without a trace. The humans had studied them, not their tactics, not their strategies, but their minds, their fears, their weaknesses, their very physiology, and then they had adapted. In silence, in secrecy, they had transformed themselves into something else. The perfect infiltrators, the perfect predators. They had learned to move undetected, to mimic neural patterns, to walk unseen among the enemy. By the time the Concorde realized what was happening, the war had already been lost. Human soldiers weren't fighting their way into enemy ships. They had always been there. A war fought in the shadows. From the bridge of the Concorde's flagship, High Chancellor Valek watched in horror as his fleet collapsed. His species had ruled for a millennium. He had overseen wars, crushed rebellions, conquered entire civilizations, but he had never seen this. Entire vessels were turning against their own commanders. Officers were executing their own admirals. Security systems were disabling their own defenses. The war had not been about firepower. It had been about control. Humanity had turned their own technology, their own minds, their own people against them. Valek turned to his second-in-command, his voice trembling. "We must retreat." But the commander did not move. Valek saw it then, the slight flicker in the officer's eyes, the way he stood just a little too still, the faintest twitch of his lips. Not a Vorix. Not anymore. Something else was looking back at him. Valek. barely had time to react before the commander raised his weapon and pulled the trigger. The last message across the entire Concorde fleet, the same thing was happening. The invasion force, once numbering in the millions, was gone within hours. There was no great final battle, no last stand, only silence, only darkness. And then, a message, broadcasted across the stars. To every remaining empire, every faction, every ruler who had ever doubted humanity's rise, a simple, chilling transmission. The age of kings is over, the age of conquerors is dead, the age of empires is no more. A pause, then the final words that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. This universe belongs to the hunters now, run. Aftermath. The dawn of a new era. No war had ever ended like this. There was no treaty, no negotiations, no peace talks, only a void where the great empires had once stood. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy. They did not claim it. They simply removed the threats, one by one. And now the once mighty rulers of the cosmos lived in fear. Fear of the silent, unseen force that had erased fleets without a trace. Fear of the species that had once been fragile, weak, insignificant, and had become something far worse. A force that did not rule with armies. A force that did not need warships. A force that had evolved beyond war itself. Humanity had become the galaxy's deadliest warriors, and the rest of the universe could only pray they would never strike again. Conclusion and call to action. And so we ask the question, was this humanity's destiny all along? Had they always been meant to rise, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as the ultimate survivors? Or had the galaxy's own arrogance sealed its fate? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories of epic sci-fi warfare, legendary warriors and universe-shaking mysteries, be sure to subscribe to XenoChronicles, because the stars are vast, and their secrets are only just beginning to unfold.